This is Tante, Belle, Cose, a podcast about the many beautiful things in Italy for you to discover. I'm your host, Danielle O'Terry. I'm a writer and the founder of Feast Travel, Arthur Avenue Food Tours, and Cilento Food Tours. On this week's episode of Tante, Belle, Cose, we are doing a live trip consultation. Now, this is something that I promised we will do live at Red Sauce Studio in Lower Manhattan. But scheduling, especially at this time of year, is tough. And it's also cough and flu season. As you might hear in my voice, I'm still a little under the weather myself. However, we are doing this one on Zoom, and I have Krista Senatore. Is that how you pronounce your name? I just made it very Italian.
Senatore.
Senatore.
Yeah.
With me on Zoom. We're both at home, and we are going to discuss her upcoming trip to Italy. And the way this trip consultation is structured is exactly the way I do it with my private clients. It's on Zoom. I receive notes ahead of time that I review, and I start to get a sense of what the client would like to do and see and experience, and what their budget is like, what they already have in mind, what are some of the bucket list experiences they have in mind as well. And then the conversation goes from there. The trip consultation also includes me putting together resources for the client that I then send to them. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you will be able to see some of that. I will keep it to a minimum for those who are listening only, but certainly, Krista, I will send you everything that we discuss afterward. First, why don't you tell me and everybody a little bit about your upcoming trip to Italy, what you want to experience, and also just some practical things when you're going and who you're traveling with.
Okay, so I planning a trip to Italy for myself and my daughter, who is this is a special trip that two of us are going to take together. I sort of had this dream of asking both daughters where they would like to visit. And I took my older daughter, who's 15, to Florence, Rome, Lucca last year after we saw Taylor Swift in Zurich. So that was pretty wild. And this year, I asked my younger daughter, and we love to watch documentaries together. So she has seen lots of documentaries about Pompeii. She's heard about the caves in Matera. And so she was really interested. And I said, well, Italy, all of that is in Italy, of course. So that's where we would like to go. I am a teacher. I'm a fifth grade teacher. And of course, my daughter's in middle school, so we have to go in the summer. We're looking at the end of July to the beginning of August as a time. And so the bucket list items are, Pompeii, Matera. My family is from Salerno, and I was able to go there for the first time last summer as well. And so that area is very special to me. And I've been to Naples when I was in college, but really haven't explored it very much. So that's also a possibility
Okay.
for this trip.
How much time do you have altogether?
10 days,
Okay.
about what we'd like. Yeah.
And do you have your plane tickets yet?
No.
Okay. So most likely you'll be flying. Do you think you'll be flying into Rome, or are you going to try to fly to Naples directly?
Probably Rome, although I am toying with the idea of trying to take a less expensive ticket in somewhere into Europe. And London looked reasonable, and then maybe fly London to Naples. I'm not certain on that yet.
Okay. Well, I'm not sure if you know, but there is a new airport in Salerno called the Costa d'Amalfi Airport, and it's a small one. But there are a lot of connecting flights. There are no big direct flights that go in there. Now, in Italy, Rome and Milan are the two big major international airports. When I fly into Italy, I'm almost always going south first to spend my time in Cilento. And just because of the cost, I usually just fly into Rome and then we'll transfer down there. However, just at that time of year, so there are direct flights from New York, from Newark, and from Philadelphia, I believe now too, to Naples, which is a smaller airport, but in the summer has those flights. They are more expensive, but sometimes it's 6 of one, half dozen of another when you consider the train ride down from Rome. And then the Salerno airport does offer more opportunities for you to fly into a place like Paris or London because, it has EasyJet, Volotea, and Ryanair, I believe. And there may be some new airlines added into that roster really soon. So definitely look for Salerno when you're choosing your flights.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. I would also, though, however, if you do go that route and you are doing a connecting flight at that time of year, I'm not normally one of these carry-on only people because, after 40, I have lots of serums and I need to carry the stuff that's going to fit in the whatever FDA regulated sizes ain't going to cut it for my skin. But nonetheless, at that time of year, I would try to travel carry-on only because London and Paris are those places where luggage does tend to get lost.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you can't do carry on only, just make sure you have your most important things. Have a couple of changes of clothes with you in your carry on. All right. So one of the things that you noted in your notes ahead of time was that you don't want to drive if at all possible, right?
I'm nervous about driving. Yeah.
The thing about Matera in particular is that in order to get there, you kind of do need a car. Now, there are buses that go from Matera is a place, and for those of you who are listening who are unfamiliar, Matera is one of the most exciting places I think you can go in Italy. It's the third oldest city on planet Earth, next to Aleppo and Jericho. And it is a city carved out of limestone, and it is famous for a series of caves. And it is very, very famous for having been the subject of a book called Christ Stopped at Eboli, which was about the horrible poverty that existed there during the fascist period. It was cleared out post-war. But in the 1980s and 1990s, it started to see a renaissance of people who were moving back into these caves and reclaiming the very amazing, brilliant, beautiful history of Matera. I'll definitely do a podcast episode about it because it's one of my favorite places in the world. And today you can go there, and a lot of people tend to really just do it as a day trip from Puglia. It's about 40 minutes from Bari, and there are a ton of day tours and buses that will take you directly there from Bari. And you can see a decent amount of it during a day trip, but generally all you see are the top of the city, which is called the Civita. You walk around, it is very hot. That limestone just radiates heat. It is that's something you, especially at that time of year, just be prepared for. Extremely hot. But to me, I think it's really a shame to go to Matera and not stay in a cave hotel, because that is an amazing experience. And one of the most beautiful innovations of Matera is that they took these caves, which really had been miserable places, and have turned them into hotels and stays. And what they have done so well in Matera is they haven't glossed over the difficult history of the place. I do feel uncomfortable sometimes. I think especially in Puglia, when there are a lot of these what are called masseria, which were like plantations, essentially, with people that lived in not the chattel slavery that we had in the United States, but something not far away from it. And just put a luxury pool there and nobody really recognizes the history. That makes me deeply uncomfortable. In Matera, they've managed to really just hit this mark where you stay in a beautiful place and you feel like $1 million, but they also acknowledge the roots behind it. And they're not in conflict with each other. So I think staying in Matera and spending a little bit more on a hotel room there is so worth it, because it's also a rich cultural experience as well. And there's a wide variety of them. So it sounds like you're interested, especially since your daughter's so interested, staying in Matera, right?
Definitely. Definitely. We want the cave hotel experience and to really, really just see and experience the city.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's wonderful. So, there's a couple of ways that you could do this trip as I'm starting to think about it for you. So you had mentioned, of course, Pompeii, that's a big part of it, maybe Naples, but then you had also listed in your notes a bunch of places in Puglia that you would like to see. Are you leaning toward one or the other, or are you trying to do you want to try to get them all in?
I was thinking is to start in Naples for a little bit, do Pompeii, and then make our way to Matera. And then if I do rent a car, which I was thinking I probably would have to do, spend at least 2 nights in Matera and then go on to see some places in Puglia. My daughter said, I want the caves and beach. So I would like a little bit of beach time. Not necessarily to stay at the beach, but to be able to go a day or two.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You can definitely do that. So let me frame this trip for you, starting from Naples. And what I'm going to do is actually open up a map so we can look at this together. Now, I should also note that there is now going to be a direct flight from New York to Bari. It's going to go from between June and October.
Oh, okay.
And, Puglia has become very hot. Well, temperature-wise, yes, but also very, very popular. Definitely a lot of luxury tourism and a lot of tourism in between as well. But most people are really going to Puglia for the beach experience, for the scenery, for a lot of the photogenic experiences that people like to have on the Amalfi Coast. But Amalfi has just gotten so crazy. And I think if you do the trip from the Naples area, you'll have, based on what you've told me so far, kind of more of the cultural experience, and you can definitely hit some amazing beaches. Also, too, flying into if you end up flying into Rome, if that winds up just being the most economical solution, it's easy to take the train to Naples. From Rome to Naples, it's just 1 hour on the fast train.
Right.
So I do that plenty of times. Even if I'm tired, I will power through for that last hour and get to Naples. So we'll leave a pin in Naples for just a moment, because once I started talking about Naples, I can't stop, because I think it's the most exciting, dynamic city in all of Italy and one of the most dynamic cities in Europe right now. But we will come back to that. I want to mention, in addition to Pompeii, there are so many other archaeological sites. And if you are interested in history, there's a lot that is very rewarding. So right now, for those who are watching with us, I've pulled up a map that I'm going to use to guide this conversation. And if you're listening, I'm going to do my best to be as descriptive as possible. One place that I just want to mention before we get started, which is a complete wild card, but for this particular time of year is a cool opportunity, is the area east of Naples called the Campi Flegrei, in particular the city of Baia, which, if we're looking at the map, we're going to zoom in here, and it's this sort of cove that you see east of Naples. Now, if you've been hearing anything about the volcano that's been rumbling in Naples, it's not Mount Vesuvius, it's actually the Campi Flegrei. And, I don't expect any imminent volcanic eruptions, but that has been in the news on and off. So what's really interesting about Baia is that it is the ancient city of Baia is an underwater archaeological site. And in the summer, you can go there and do glass bottom boat tours or scuba or snorkel in the ruins. So I always put that in the category, which I think belongs in everybody's trip, which is the Indiana Jones experience. And it's a way to, participate in history and archaeology, but also in a really active way. And when it's so hot in the summertime, if you want to, I always try to strategize for how to get the best out of the season that you're traveling, and doing as many things in the water as possible is certainly one way to get out of the heat. So it's definitely, it's not far from Naples, but I would say it's a little more off the beaten path, just because there aren't a ton of tourists that go there. But you can get the train, or you can arrange for a car transfer to take you there. Even just the local Naples city taxi will take you there. And there is a port where you can get on these glass bottom boat tours. And as you go through the bay, you see, and they point out all of the ruins that are below water. There's also a castle, which has a lot of the archaeological ruins that have been taken from the water. There is a lot of mosaic floors and statuary that you can still see underwater, but the most important pieces are in a museum. And then there are the above ground ruins at Baia. Now, Baia was like the Las Vegas or the Miami Beach of the Roman world. It's where all of the most important people went to go be bad and have fun. Julius Caesar's assassination was plotted there. Essentially, the Bay of Naples in the summertime was where all of Rome's elite, the political elite, went to have a good time. And so there are so many archaeological sites there. Baia is just one of them. The above ground ruins in particular has a place that's referred to as the Temple of Mercury, but really it was the cold room, the frigidarium of a ginormous spa complex. And it has an oculus that's a little bit smaller than the one in the Pantheon, but 100 years older. So this is to say, one of the architectural marvels of the world. And nobody's there. It's like you and the lizards and the laundry from the lady who lives next door dangling into the ruins. So if history is your thing, you might want to see if you can fit in a trip to Baia.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
My daughter would love that.
It's like an underwater.
Oh, wow.
And if you go on YouTube, there's definitely a lot of content out there about it. There are lots of underwater archaeological teams that work there, and There was a segment on 60 Minutes, maybe 3 or 4 years ago. There's an American archaeologist, or I think he was actually not even an archaeologist, but just a man who got fascinated with Baia and started working there. So there's definitely a lot of content out there if you want to learn more about it. And you can do it as a day trip from Naples. So if you do decide to stay, you can just make that a one-day excursion.
Okay.
All right. Also, in addition to Pompeii, now Pompeii is huge and it is crowded, but really it's crowded in the morning and crowded with the groups that come in from the cruise ships. A lot of the cruises come into Naples and they pick people up right at the ports, put them on buses, and they go and they do a very rote tour. I know people that have taken cruises are getting their backs up right now, but maybe you had a great tour. I hope you did. Some of the tour guides are very good. Some of them are just there to sell you cameos. And the cameos are not bad. If you did buy a cameo, you didn't get ripped off. They're actually very legit cameos. But nonetheless, you can go really deep in Pompeii, and it's a place that's very much worth investing in having a good guide. As you're thinking about your budget and your dollars and how you want to allocate them, Pompeii is a place to invest in having a great guide because there is so much to see and understand. Now, the rote tours will kind of take you to the main sort of arena, Colosseum area. They will take you to the brothel. They will take you to the gladiator school. There's so many other things to see there as well. The Forum, of course, is one of the stops usually. If it's a very hot day, the Villa of the Mysteries, which is on the periphery of the archaeological site, is a wonderful place to spend some time. There are vineyards in the middle of Pompeii that you could explore. And there's also an actual working vineyard not very far away where you could go have a nice lunch if you would like to incorporate that, a lunch and a wine tasting, perhaps. They also have horses where your kids could go horseback riding in the vines, if that would be something you'd be interested in doing. But overall, if you do it, in order to enjoy Pompeii best, go in the late afternoon. The only thing you need to know is bring a water bottle with you because the cafeteria area closes really early. I'm not quite sure why, like 2 or 3 o'clock. But there are free fountains of water all over, and you're going to need it because it's pretty hot. But the archaeological park is open till sunset. So you go around lunchtime, go have lunch first. There's a lot of great food in Pompeii. Modern Pompeii is actually pretty big. It's a city. There's a lot of good things to eat there. And then go to the archaeological park in the late afternoon and the sun won't be so intense and the crowds will be very, very small. There are very few of the big tour bus groups that come in late afternoon. Everybody's trying to, I'm doing air quotes for those listening, beat the crowds by going in the morning. All the crowds, 100% in every single place are going in the morning. You're beating nothing by going in the morning. Unless it's the Trevi Fountain at 5 a.m. You're not beating a crowd. Go in the late afternoon. Herculaneum is an amazing site. There's a lot less signage. It's a lot less well organized for a visitor who's going without a guide. So if you do Herculaneum, you definitely need a good guide, but it's also much smaller and you can see the entire site in a 2-3 hour visit. And then also one other place just to put on your radar is called Villa Oplontis. And it's here in this town called Torre Annunziata. You see it here. It says Scavi di Oplontis. Scavi means ruins. Okay. Have you ever heard of it?
I might have heard you mention it on your podcast. I think. Yes.
I'm always waving the flag for Oplontis. Oplontis is, so the town of Torre Annunziata, to get to Pompeii, to Herculaneum, to any of these places from Naples, you take what is essentially the commuter train, the Circumvesuviana, which is on the lower level of the Naples train station. The intercity trains come in on the main platform. Local trains are downstairs. And you get off at Torre Annunziata. And it's not a wealthy town. Let's put it that way. It's a low middle class town. And you might get off and be like, where did this crazy woman from a podcast send me? It looks a little ragged, but it's fine. And the archaeological park is very, very close by. And what it was a giant villa because the entire Bay of Naples, similar to what we were talking about at Baia, was filled with mansions of Rome's wealthiest elite. And this was one of them. It's locally called Villa Poppaea because Poppaea was the wife of the emperor, second wife, I can't remember now, of the Emperor Nero. She was actually from Pompeii. And their there was some archaeological find. I believe it was a ring or a vase, actually, that has her name on it. So maybe it was hers. The house was actually vacant when Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, and there were scaffolds up. So somebody had moved out and they were preparing for a new owner. But it is the most beautiful site and quiet. Beautiful frescoes, fountains. They've now reinstalled a lot of the sculpture that was found there that used to be in museums and is now reinstalled on site. It's mostly covered, so if it's hot, you have plenty of shade. And once again, you can see the entire thing in depth in 2 hours and really have the experience. It's like I try to compare it to, imagine if the Versace mansion in Miami was destroyed by a volcano and then you went there for the afternoon. Walking in and out of the house, you can see the infinity pool, you can see the servants' quarters, and really some of the most beautiful frescoes from this period of history. So you might want to put that on your list as well. There's
definitely will.
Yeah, there's so many things to see, but Oplontis is small. So like if you wanted to do like Herculaneum and Oplontis in one visit, you definitely could do it. And for those also who are listening, the walking in Pompeii and Herculaneum is very challenging because the roads were so uneven. They had sort of like above ground sewers. Even if you're in really good shape, your knees are barking at you at the end of the day, whereas Oplontis is much easier. You do have to go down. There, I believe, is now disability accessibility if you need it, to descend into the archaeological site. But once you're inside, it's pretty flat. I mean, it's still stone and terrain, but in general, it's just if you have general mobility issues, you get tired easily, then Oplontis is a really, really good choice. So, all right. So those would be, those would be potential day trips from Naples. And also they could be potential day trips from Salerno if you did want to stay in the city of Salerno. And it sounds like you already spent some time there.
I did. So I'd like to explore Naples more if it's manageable.
So at this point in your trip, if you're basing yourself in Naples, these are all easy day trips. Baia, Pompeii, Oplontis, Herculaneum, and they could be 2 or 3 trips. Now, for Matera, you'll have to make a choice. So from Naples, you can get a bus. There's the Flixi bus. That's that's the biggest company that will get you out to Matera. However, if you're willing to rent a car, I think it will be very rewarding. And it's really not so bad. Now, if you've been to Naples, you might think driving in Naples is terrifying. It is. And I am a very experienced driver in Italy, and I drive in New York City all the time, and I will not drive in Naples. However, what I do is I just go to the airport and pick up a rental car there, and you literally pull right onto the highway from the rental car desk. And once you're on the highway, it's fine. Now, the only thing to know about Italian drivers is they tailgate. Ignore them. You do you. As my father, who was a bus driver and taught people how to drive New York City buses. And when he taught me how to drive, it was serious business. He always said to me, let other people do the driving. They want to speed. They want to pass you. Let them. So once you're on the highway, it's fine. And surprisingly, the rental car desk at the Naples airport has some of the nicest rental car people I've ever met. It's usually nice. Rome, it's a complete nightmare. They're abusive. It doesn't matter if they speak perfect Italian. They're terrible. In Naples, they're oddly nice. So this is all to say, if you're open and you're willing, it might be less of a scary experience than you might think. Once you get on the highway, you're going to actually cruise right behind the Amalfi Coast. You'll see a mountain range on your right. And that is the Amalfi Coast. You'll pass by Pompeii, Herculaneum. You'll drive around Salerno. You'll see a tiny bit of the Amalfi Coast as you do. And then you will hit the highway to essentially go right across the middle of central Italy. And this area in the center, as you pass through the eastern part of Campania and Basilicata, is the least populated part of Italy. So there are very few people on the road. The highways are smooth and easy. And there's some areas where there's some construction and they will reroute you, but it's very organic. They have it set well. It's almost a little boring because you're just going to be on mostly highway. You have some beautiful vistas of the mountains. And you will see these little villages for, especially for the passengers in the car that are way up high in the mountains. But it's also say it's a very serene, easy drive.
Okay.
And then when you get to Matera, you do definitely want to stay in a hotel that's going to have some sort of a parking agreement with a parking garage outside the city. You definitely don't want to drive in the city because it's, the third oldest inhabited city on Earth. Parking's not great. And there's all of what are called the ZTL zones, which are pedestrianized only. But, I've told the story before on another podcast, but it's worth sharing once again. The first time I went to Matera, like being all macho about my parallel parking skills, I'm like, I'll just park right near, I'm fine. I can do it. I know what I'm doing. No. The hotel where I stayed at, which was called the Aquadio, which I recommend, it's really nice. They said we have an agreement with a parking lot outside of the city, and it was in a very modern part. It looks like New Jersey, and it was like actually a rental car office as well. And after making a giant mistake and incurring several tickets for driving in the ZTL zones, I went back to where they told me to originally. And two lovely young men who spoke perfect English were like, "Oh, of course, madam, here you go." Took the car and then drove us directly to the door of the hotel. So take their advice.
Okay.
Go to the strange parking lot outside the city in an area that looks like New Jersey, and trust them. They do hospitality very, very well.
All right. Good to know.
Yeah. And when you're in the city, you will be on foot. The Aquadio is a 5-star, but I think it's a very worthy splurge. And of course, Sextantio is the most famous. What you have in the Sassi of Matera are what are called alberghi diffusi, which mean diffused hotels. And so there's usually some sort of central check-in place, a reception area. Often in those central areas, there may be a spa or a restaurant or both. And they will give you your keys, and then you'll go through the lanes of the area just nearby to your own independent cave. So the hotel is not all under one roof, but it's sort of spread out like a village. And it's one thing that's important to know in Matera is as you're walking around, GPS is a hot mess. It will tell you to, go in a direction that would require. I said it's like being like the road runner and the coyote. You're like, I would have to jump over a gorge in order to continue on this road. So a paper map and also just taking your time and not being in a rush is the best thing. And I would definitely have at least 2 nights there to explore the Sassi, to explore the Civita, which is the more modern. I say modern, I mean 1600s part at the top of the city. And you definitely want to go to the cave of the original sin. And I would also recommend this would be another sort of worthy tour to invest in. There is this whole gorge, the Murgia Valley, which is just outside of Matera. And there are a lot of these cave churches because in the 8, 9, 1000s, there were monks from Greece who came through this area evangelizing. People in the area were still worshiping the Roman pantheon. And they began teaching the local people about Christianity by painting on the walls of caves and gathering communities there. And these cave churches continue to be discovered. There are about 150 of them, which are known. And if you go out into the Murgia Valley, there's now one of those Tibetan bridges. And then you can go on a tour to visit some of the cave churches. There are even dinosaur footprints in that valley. It's such an ancient place. Wow. But the Cave of the Original Sin is my personal favorite. And it is just outside the city of Matera. So probably on your way in or your way out, because here you will need the car. You could hit the Cave of the Original Sin. And what you will do is you need to first go to the website to make an appointment because they only allow 10 people in at a time. I'm pointing it out here on the map as well. It's just outside the main. It looks on the map like it's a far distance, but after you sort of wind your way down the hill, it's maybe 5 minutes outside of the city. Okay. And so you'll sort of listen to the GPS. Here it does work, and you'll pull up kind of a dirt road, and there's a agriturismo and restaurant there where you will park your car, and you will meet the guide and check in, and then that person, once everybody's gathered, will then get into a pickup truck, and you'll follow him down a dirt road because the cave is actually on private property, and the people who own the farm sort of have a special deal with the Italian government to allow tourists there. And so it really feels like a like a weird movie. Like you hear the woo woo in your head. It feels like a Western. I'm following a pickup truck down a dirt road in southern Italy to go into a cave. Is this a responsible choice? It feels a little odd, but it's fine.
Okay.
And you'll arrive at a vineyard, you'll park the car, and you'll follow the guide into the cave. You'll go inside, they'll tell you to sit down, it will be dark, and then they will light it up.
Oh, so
And you
cool.
will see this series of paintings that were made in the 800s that show the story of creation of Adam and Eve. And they do play this recording that's in Italian. They have an earpiece in English. It's actually, historically, the information on it is very good. The earpiece itself is a little tinny. At a certain point, I just took it out and just sat there and had the awe and wonder, because it's just such an amazing, adventurous experience and a beautiful one. And also, you go to Italy and you see all these amazing churches, but there's something about the humble spirituality of thinking people worshipped in this cave in the 800s when they were first learning Christianity. That's really moving. It's one of these experiences. The cave, we don't know how long it was in use, but it was certainly abandoned and not rediscovered until the 1960s. So it's really an experience of like going back to the way worship was many, many centuries ago. It hasn't been renovated. It wasn't, made Baroque in the 1600s. It wasn't touched during the Counter-Reformation. So I think it's a really profound cultural and religious experience. If you are religious, I think it is very moving. If you're not religious at all, you certainly can still appreciate, that sense of awe and wonder. And then definitely that restaurant on the way out, the Agriturismo, has some fantastic food. So if you want to have lunch there before you leave.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a car, there's a few other things that you can do. If you've taken the bus, then you should just get the bus back to Naples. You could go to Altamura. It's a city that is very famous for bread and ancient bread ovens. There's a bread oven that's about 700 years old, I believe. It's still in operation there. There's some wonderful food and wine and a beautiful cathedral as well. So that's another small city that you could explore. And because I mentioned a beach, I will mention these very underrated but gorgeous beaches that are on the Arch of Italy's boot here. I would recommend, maybe in prep for this trip, there's a book called Murder in Matera by an author named Helene Stupinski. Have you heard of it?
No, I haven't.
She's most famous for a book called Five Finger Discount. She's wonderful. I met her and she's become a friend. And she grew up in Jersey City, with always hearing these stories that her grandmother ended up in New Jersey from the area near Matera because of a murder. And she decides to really kind of go back and investigate this. And so the book is her trying to figure out her family's story, but she's also spending a lot of time in this area. So you will get a lot of great ideas for the things to do and see here, which are as off the beaten path as it gets. But in the summer, these beaches are spectacular. You're on the Ionian Sea, so the water is turquoise and tranquil and absolutely gorgeous. There are lots of lovely beach clubs. Only Italians will be there. And I will give you the name and the notes of one beach club in particular that Helene recommended to me, which, I remember her posting it on Facebook saying, "This is absolutely paradise. Tell nobody." But I, of course, texted her. It's like, "There's a beach club. I need to know." And the most famous town that's near there, and it's not very famous, but it has some note, is Bernalda. Okay. And that's because Francis Ford Coppola's roots are there. And he actually went back and bought the home of the noble family of the town and turned it into a hotel. And it's a very expensive hotel. It's like $800 a night. But they do have a restaurant that's priced for normal people. And so you could go to Bernalda, you could go see that palazzo, you can go have a nice lunch or a nice dinner there. But some of these beaches are really spectacular. And in particular, there were Greek ruins here, and there are still some temples that are left standing, in particular at Metaponto. And if you were in Cilento last year, so you saw the temples at Pestum?
Yes. I loved it.
Yes. Very similar. So Pestum, the three Greek temples there are the most well-intact Greek temples in the world, better than the temples in Greece, in fact. These temples are not nearly as well intact, but similar and also devoted to Hera and within that same lineage. And they're just kind of there. They're just sort of feral, hanging out. There is nobody around. So that is, again, another adventure that you could have in this area with a car. From there too, it's 40 minutes to Bari. If you would like to go into Puglia, the northern part of Puglia at that time of year will be very busy. Monopoli, Polignano a Mare, Locorotondo, Albero Bello. These are the most famous places in Puglia. They will be very busy. I sometimes joke that Puglia is the Florida of Italy because some people from northern Italy, especially Milan, have a summer house there. At that time of year, there will definitely be lots of Italians and everything will be open. But one thing I think it's worth noting that not a lot of people realize is Puglia can be quite expensive, especially in this area because it's a seasonal economy. And I get it, right? Like you make hay when the sun shines.
Right.
So as you're sort of plotting out your budget and, just like in the United States or anywhere, things cost different things in different places. What you'll spend in Matera, you might spend more for a hotel, but you'll be getting quite a bit for it. What you'll spend on the beach in Altamura, elsewhere in Basilicata, is a pittance, and you'll get a lot for your money. Puglia will be more. So, it's important. We have our wish list of things we want to do, but then when you look at the numbers, that often helps make decisions very quickly.
Right.
That's just something to keep in mind. As you're considering, especially accommodations at that time of year, because there are a lot of Airbnbs. Everything is going to be top of the market at that time of year. By the end of September, early October, Puglia is shut down until Easter. So they go a long period of time without making much money at all.
Okay.
So this is the teeth of that. Now, before we move on, is there anything else in Puglia that you would want me to discuss?
Well, I was just curious about, like if we should try. I mean, it looks like Lecce is actually quite a ways away.
It's about 2 hours.
Yeah.
Bari, and Puglia is very flat, and so the driving is pretty easy. But if you're going to do Lecce, I would stay there because I think by the time after that drive, you'll want to stay there. Plus, you'll want to explore. It's not something that you want to do a quick in and out of. And there are lots of Airbnbs, to kind of keep costs down in Lecce and in the surrounding area. I personally think the southern part of Puglia is more interesting. There are some, of course, beautiful beaches everywhere. The Adriatic side is rock. The Ionian side is sand. One of my very best tips, in addition to the parking in Matera, if you go to Puglia and you're going to go to the Adriatic side, buy those little rubber shoes, those little Aquas.
Yes.
Absolutely necessary. You cannot get in the water without those. I tried doing it and it was absolute massacre to my feet. So buy those. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to do Lecce, Otranto, I think, is a beautiful city. That would be a good place to stay, but then you would want to stay there for a few days.
In Lecce or in Otranto, and then just do a day trip to Otranto? Or
depending on your priorities, if you want to do another city, then you can stay inside Lecce. If you want to really be by the sea, do a bike ride, be outside, then I would try to stay in Otranto.
Okay.
And then you could do a day trip into Lecce.
Is there a place in the first place Ionian side that you would recommend if we wanted to just stay by the beach a couple days closer to like one of the places you mentioned? Yeah.
I do have a place that I will dig up and I will afterwards. I have no requests to go to this area, even though I do recommend it. So I don't have it right in my database.
Okay.
I will find it for you.
Okay.
I think more people need to start going to these places because, especially if you love the water, the beaches are so beautiful.
Yeah.
And driving wise, again, another possibility, this would add additional driving, but it's worth mentioning because it's so gorgeous, would be the southern part of Cilento, northern part of Basilicata.
Okay.
Two places in particular that I'll note. Maratea, which sounds like Matera, but it's not. Maratea is a beautiful seaside town. It's in Basilicata. And hopping in the summer, absolutely hopping with Italians and other European tourists with spectacular beaches. And then a little further up, this area here, this is the southern Cilento. Two places in particular. One is Palinuro, and the other is called Marina di Camerota. This is all part of a nature preserve. It's wild. It feels like the beginning of time. It's just, there are white sand beaches, deep turquoise water, anchovy boats. This is where the best anchovies in Italy come from. You can go on a boat tour at night where you shadow one of the anchovy boats, and then you go onto a secret beach and have a fish fry. The boat ride around the Cape of Palinuro is one of the most spectacular sights you can see. I don't understand how it's not just destroyed with influencers because it's so photogenic. If you saw Wonder Woman, the Gal Gadot one from 2017,
Yes.
they filmed it on the beaches of Palinuro, where the Amazons are fighting on the white sand beaches. And it is a bargain. I mean, the prices are so low. You can do a full day boat ride, and I'll give you the name of Adriano, a wonderful boat captain I know who speaks excellent English. I mean, it's like 40 euros for, per person
Wow.
lunch for an amazing day. Something that in Amalfi would cost you a boat ride in the southern part of Cilento, like say for a group of 4 is going to cost you, maybe 100, $200. Same boat ride in Amalfi is going to cost 600, 700. And the one in the southern Cilento is actually going to be less famous, less glamorous, but more beautiful. And the water is spectacular.
Okay.
So if you wanted to spend a couple of days on the beach, either one of those towns would definitely do it. And again, you do need a car, but the driving is fine. And you will have a vacation, like a proper vacation, as well as a cultural experience at the same time.
Okay.
Just really the advantage of doing southern Italy in the summertime. I know a lot of people don't want to travel in August for good reason, but going to southern Italy, going to beach areas at this time of year, yeah, it'll be more expensive than at other times, but this is the fillet of the season. I mean, you're getting to experience everything that's there at its height, and it's fun when everybody's there and it's busy. I don't like the kind of crowds that you get in a place like Sorrento, for example, where everybody's just sort of crowding in, like, what are we supposed to do and see here? I don't know. Versus in a place like this, which is crowded with people who have been dying to get down here all year to have fun and go to the beach and eat good food. It's a different vibe, and it's fun to be in that kind of atmosphere where everybody's really excited to be there.
It's really cool.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked about all of these different possibilities. Let's go back to Naples now.
Okay.
About what you can do and see there, which is a lot.
Right.
Naples is a big city, and every single neighborhood is different. If you have just a short amount of time there, then you want to make sure that you see the historic center, which is another one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It's about 2,500 years old in the historic center of Naples. And so as you walk along the street level, right below your feet are Greek and Roman temples and cisterns, and a tour of underground Naples has got to be part of your itinerary in order to understand it. And anything underground in these hot months is great because it's 65 degrees underground. So all the catacombs, all the caves, all the underground ruins, that's where you want to go. Mass tourism has definitely come to Naples. The center of Naples is very, very, very crowded, but it's still very much worth seeing, especially if you love history. You'll see a lot of like the cheap Aperol spritzes, and that famous sandwich shop in Florence now has an outpost in Naples, and you could just ignore all of that. There's so many amazing historical sites to see. And I will make a list of those in your notes as well. I would consider staying in the Chiaia district, which is a more upscale district, and there are actually a fair amount of Airbnbs or guest houses in that area. It's not far from the waterfront, and it is connected on the subway. What's great about Naples is the subway is excellent. It was built in the 90s, so it's pretty modern. It's easy. It's not complicated to navigate at all. And you can move around the city, all the districts very, very easily. But Chiaia will give you more of a neighborhood feel. You could walk to the waterfront. You can do some amazing shopping. There's so many great boutiques, little shops. In Chiaia, you will also find Fendi and Prada and a whole district of all the designer stuff. But there are a lot of independent designers there as well. So even just great window shopping. And then the Archaeological Museum, if you're visiting Pompeii, is a must because all of the treasures of Pompeii are stored in the Archaeological Museum. I would recommend a late afternoon visit. They are also open till, I think at least 6:30, 7 o'clock. I think 7 o'clock is when they close. Check the hours, of course. But the big bus tours come in the morning and after 3 o'clock. That's when I generally like to go, is at about 3 o'clock. it's empty and it's big, but it's endless. And I've been to that museum, a dozen times, and there's still wings of it that I haven't seen. It's just a fascinating place. You have a lot of different options about how to break up those 10 days, but hopefully, like with the spread of ideas that I've given you so far, you can, talk with your family and make some decisions about what are the most important things. And in my opinion, I think if you can incorporate some fun beach time mixed in with all this fantastic culture, you'll really have a complete vacation experience.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for, like some culture, but then also some downtime as well.
Mhm.
Where would you recommend staying then if we went to Cilento? Of those places you mentioned, are there hotels or Airbnbs or places to stay there?
Yeah, there's both. And there are tons of very inexpensive guest houses. Now, some of the inexpensive guest houses down there, I wouldn't recommend because they are for Europeans who are not accustomed to a good mattress.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
I always say the two things that Americans do best in the world are steak and mattresses. When I eat the Florentine steak, I'm like, honestly, and there's nothing better than an American ribeye and a mattress made by an American company. So there are two hotels in particular, which I will include in my notes, one in
Okay.
Palermo and one in Marina di Camerota that have excellent mattresses. I mean, some of the guest houses are so inexpensive, but they might be a little too rustic. There are a lot of Italians and Germans and Belgians that will travel to southern Cilento. This is where they go annually for vacation, family vacations. They might travel in a camper van. They might bring their own sheets. So, not speaking Italian and trying to book something from afar, I think in this area, given that the prices are pretty good to begin with, staying in a hotel would be.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so for those of you who are watching on YouTube, this is a database of all of my resources that I'm going to now use to fill out to give Krista all of these resources. I'm going to divide them up by the locations and fill this in so that she has all of the details about what to do and see. And then you can use this to make all of your decisions and map out what you want to do and see also with your budget. Tell me, what questions do you have?
Oh my gosh. No, I feel like I just have to process it all.
Yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, but I think the main thing is, that you really honored is, Naples, the ancient sites, Matera, and then after that, I don't really feel as strong. I'd like to see Puglia, but it's more just the beach time, and I loved Cilento when I went before.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I'm thinking if we did 3 different sort of hubs, Naples, Matera, and then one of the spots in Cilento, or a place in Puglia.
If you just want one quick beach day, the beaches at Pestum are fantastic. So you can always
Okay. Is there a beach club? Or because when I looked before, it didn't look like there were a lot of hotels right there.
No, there are,
There
and quite
are.
a range. What I would go to Beach Club 93,
Okay.
Pestum, and it's the nicest one. It's definitely the most expensive. I mean, some of them are like €10. But Beach Club 93 is more expensive because they have a saltwater pool and they have a great restaurant and they have nice towels and they'll bring you sandwiches on the beach. So
Right.
it's owned by the same people who own the 5-star hotel that's in Pestum, the Savoy. So if you've just got one day, spend a little
Okay.
extra and do it up. The beach at Pestum is wonderful.
Oh, okay.
A big, warm, salty bathtub. I love the beach at Pestum.
That's good to know. That's good to know. And the drive from Matera to southern Cilento, that's okay. It looked like I saw lots of mountains on the map.
You'll want to prioritize the highway. And then one thing to always just know is that Google really likes to try to divert you onto a cow path to save 5 minutes on your
Oh
drive.
gosh.
So, you're traveling with people, make somebody else the master and commander of the GPS to just say, look at the route, know the name of the highway. And if you're getting a message that's like, turn left to get off the highway, and it looks like it's just going to bring you on some detour to save 5 minutes. All right, I'm going to compile all of these things and send them to you. And then if you have
Okay.
questions, let me know, keep me posted, and you'll have to do a follow-up after the trip.
Absolutely. This is fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Tante, Belle, Cose. We will be doing more of these live trip consultations, which will hopefully serve as a model to help you with your own trip planning. And if you want to book your own trip consultation with me, just go to feasttravel.com. Now, trip planning season is about to kick off right after the holidays. And so if you would like to join our trip planning community, just subscribe monthly or annually on Substack. I'm going to be hosting a monthly Zoom. We already had our December Zoom, where you can ask me any and all of your questions, and I answer them directly. And there's also a subscriber chat always available for you to plug in your questions. I'll see you next week.